First contact and denial. The research station, Harmony, floated in the silent void between two worlds. A testament to humanity's greatest diplomatic achievement. Dr. Marcus Chun pressed his face against the transport's viewport, watching the massive structure grow larger as they approached. The station was a marvel of engineering, half-human design with its curved organic lines, half-orthogonal construction with its sharp crystalline angles. Like the peace treaty it represented, it was a careful balance of two very different ways of thinking. First time seeing a joint station, Doctor? Asked Captain Elena Rodriguez from the pilot's seat. Her weathered hands moved expertly over the controls as she guided their small transport toward the docking bay. First time being assigned to one, Marcus replied, adjusting his diplomatic uniform. The fabric felt strange after months of wearing. Simple lab coats. I've studied the reports, but seeing it in person is different, Elena chuckled. Wait until you meet the Vortex. Reports don't do them justice either. Her tone carried a mix of respect and wariness that Marcus had heard from many humans who worked closely with their new allies. The docking process was smooth, automated systems guiding them into the Vortex design bay. As the transport settled onto the deck, Marcus gathered his belongings and took a deep breath. 6 months ago, he had been a simple xenobiologist studying alien plant life on remote worlds. Now he was humanity's newest diplomatic representative, tasked with maintaining the fragile peace between two species who had been at war for over a decade. The airlock hissed open, and Marcus stepped into a world that was neither fully human nor entirely alien. The corridor beyond was a careful blend of human warmth and vortex efficiency. Soft lighting mixed with the harsh geometric patterns that the Vortex preferred, creating an environment that felt both familiar and strange. Dr. Chen, welcome to Harmony Station. The voice belonged to a tall woman in a crisp blue uniform. I'm Station Commander Sarah Park. We're glad to have you aboard. Marcus shook her hand, noting the firm grip and direct gaze. Thank you, Commander. I'm looking forward to working here. Your quarters are ready, but first, let me introduce you to your Vorthak counterpart. Commander Park led him through a series of corridors toward the central research facility. Commander Zareth Kyle is their top xenobiologist and military liaison. She's been here for 3 months, ever since the joint research project began. They entered a vast laboratory filled with equipment from both species. The human sections were cluttered with organic curves and warm lighting, while the Vorthak areas were pristine and angular. At the center of the room, standing before a massive holographic display, was the most striking being Marcus had ever seen. Commander Zareth Kyle was tall, nearly 7 feet, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. Her face was angular and sharp, with large silver eyes that held an intelligence that felt almost predatory. She wore a form-fitting black uniform that accentuated her alien grace, and her movements were precise and controlled as she manipulated the holographic data. Commander Kyle, Park called out, I'd like you to meet Dr. Marcus Chen, our new diplomatic representative. Zareth turned, and Marcus felt those silver eyes studying him with the intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. She approached. With measured steps, her expression completely neutral. Dr. Chun, she said, inclining her head slightly. Her voice carried a musical quality that was common among Vortex, but underneath it was something cold and distant. I have reviewed your academic work. Your research on xenobotany is adequate for a human. Marcus blinked at the backhanded compliment. Thank you, Commander. I look forward to working with you. As do I. Zareth's silver eyes seemed to pierce through him. Perhaps working with humans will provide useful data on emotional decision-making and its impact on scientific accuracy. Commander Park cleared her throat. I'll leave you two to get acquainted. Dr. Chen, your first briefing is in 2 hours. Commander Kyle will show you around the facility. As the station commander departed, Marcus found himself alone with the Vorthok for the first time. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hum of the station's life support systems. You seem uncomfortable? Zareth observed, tilting her head slightly. This is a common reaction when humans first encounter our species. Your emotional responses are quite transparent. I'm not uncomfortable, Marcus replied, though he realized she was right. There was something about her presence that made him feel exposed, as if she could see through his diplomatic training to the nervous scientist beneath. Fascinating, she murmured, making a note on a small device. Even when denying emotional states, humans display clear physiological indicators. Your heart rate has increased and your skin temperature has risen by zero point 0.3 degrees. Marcus stared at her. You're monitoring my vital signs? Constantly. It is standard procedure when interacting with humans. Your species is ruled by emotion, which makes you unpredictable and potentially dangerous. She gestured for him to follow her toward the research area. Come, I will show you our current projects. As they walked through the laboratory, Zareth explained the various experiments with the precision of a computer. Her knowledge was impressive, but her delivery was completely clinical. She spoke of living organisms as if they were mere collections of data, without any consideration for their nature as living beings. This is our current study, she said, stopping before a containment unit that held several small bird-like creatures. We are testing their response to various environmental stimuli. The subjects have shown interesting adaptation patterns. Marcus watched the creatures huddled together in one corner of the enclosure, their feathers ruffled with stress. They look frightened. Frightened. Zareth's silver eyes fixed on him. They are displaying behavioral responses to unfamiliar stimuli. Fear is an emotional interpretation that has no scientific value. But look at how they're clustering together for comfort, Marcus pointed out. They're clearly distressed. Distressed? Zareth made another note. You are projecting human emotional concepts onto simple biological responses. This is exactly the kind of thinking that makes your species inferior in scientific endeavors. Marcus felt a flash of irritation. Inferior? We've made incredible advances in xenobiology precisely because we consider the emotional and social aspects of alien life. Emotion clouds judgment, Zareth replied coldly. It leads to irrational decisions and compromised research. The Vorthok approach is pure logic, free from the weakness of feeling. And that's why you've been at war with half the galaxy for the past century? The words escaped before Marcus could stop them. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Zareth's silver eyes narrowed. Our military actions were based on logical resource allocation and strategic necessity, she said, her voice like ice. Unlike humans, we do not make decisions based on attachment, sentiment, or the illusion you call love. Love isn't an illusion, Marcus said, his voice softer now. It's one of the most powerful forces in the universe. Zareth laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Love is a chemical reaction that impairs judgment and creates irrational attachment. Humans use it to justify weakness and poor decision-making. We Vorthics have evolved beyond such primitive responses. Have you? Marcus asked, studying her face. Or have you just convinced yourselves that suppressing emotions makes you stronger? We don't love like you do, Zareth said with absolute certainty. We don't form irrational attachments. We don't make decisions based on feelings. We are logical, efficient, and superior because we are free from the chaos of emotion. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and the computer's voice echoed through the facility. Hull breach in Section 7. Emergency protocols activated. All personnel to emergency stations. Section 7, Zareth said, her expression shifting to something Marcus hadn't seen before concern. That's the primary research habitat. The breeding population for the Kepler ecosystem study is housed there. Without waiting for a response, she was moving, her long legs carrying her swiftly through the corridors. Marcus followed, surprised by her sudden urgency. For someone who claimed emotions were weakness, she seemed genuinely worried about that. Research subjects thought they reached Section 7 to find chaos. The hull breach had been sealed, but the habitat's life support systems were failing. Inside the massive biodome, thousands of plant and animal species from the Kepler's system were struggling to survive as temperature and atmospheric pressure fluctuated wildly. The environmental controls are failing, reported Lieutenant Kim Walsh, the human engineer on duty. We're losing pressure in the habitat faster than we can compensate. Can we evacuate the specimens? Marcus asked. Not in time, Walsh replied. We've got maybe 20 minutes before the habitat becomes uninhabitable. Marcus turned to Zareth, expecting her to be calculating the logical cost-benefit analysis of the situation. Instead, he was surprised to see her silver eyes fixed on the habitat with something that looked remarkably like distress. There must be something we can do, she said quietly. 5 years of research. Irreplaceable genetic diversity. We cannot simply let them die. Commander, Walsh said, the risk to the station is too great if we delay the emergency protocols. Standard procedure is to seal the section and minimize casualties. Standard procedure, Zareth repeated, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus watched her face, seeing the conflict playing out behind those silver eyes. Logic warred with something else, something she claimed her species didn't possess. What if we could stabilize the habitat temporarily? Marcus suggested. Give us time to evacuate the specimens? Impossible, Walsh said. The environmental systems are too damaged, not impossible, Zareth said suddenly. Difficult, dangerous, but not impossible. She turned to Marcus, and he saw something in her expression that he hadn't expected, determination, mixed with desperation. If we could reroute the life support from the adjacent sections, we could buy time. That would put those sections at risk, Walsh pointed out. The adjacent sections are storage areas, Zareth replied. No life forms would be endangered. Marcus stared at her. This was the same Vorthak who had just finished lecturing him about the superiority of logic over emotion. Yet here she was, proposing a risky plan to save a collection of research subjects that, by her own definition, should be expendable. Commander Kyle, he said softly, why does this matter so much to you? Zareth's silver eyes met his, and for a moment her carefully controlled expression cracked. I don't know, she admitted. It should not matter. They are research subjects. Replaceable. Logically, we should follow standard protocol. But the thought of watching them die when we might save them. She trailed off, looking confused and almost frightened by her own words. This is illogical. I am compromised. You're not compromised, Marcus said gently. You're caring. You're feeling empathy for other living beings. That's not weakness. It's what makes us capable of doing more than just surviving. Zara stared at him, her silver eyes wide with something that might have been wonder or terror. This is not possible. Vorthics do not feel empathy. We do not form attachments to research subjects. We are logical. Maybe, Marcus said. You're more like us than you want to admit. Before she could respond, another alarm sounded. The habitat's life support systems were failing faster than anticipated. Whatever they were going to do, they had to do it now. I'll help you, Marcus said. We can reroute the systems together. Zareth looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. Thank you, she said, and something in her voice had changed. The cold distance was still there, but underneath it was something warmer, more uncertain. As they worked side by side to save the research specimens, Marcus found himself stealing glances at his alien colleague. She moved with mechanical precision, but there was something different about her now. The rigid control was still there, but he could see cracks in her armor, moments where concern flickered across her features, instances where her hands trembled slightly as she worked. It took 2 hours of careful work, but they managed to stabilize the habitat long enough to evacuate the specimens to safety. As the last of the animals were transferred to secure containment, Zareth stood watching them. With an expression Marcus couldn't quite decipher. You did well, he said. They're all going to survive because of you, because of us, she corrected quietly. Then, as if realizing what she had said, she straightened her shoulders and resumed her cold demeanor. The research data will be preserved. That is what matters. But Marcus had seen the truth in her eyes. It wasn't the data that mattered to her, it was the lives they had saved. The proud, logical Vorthek who claimed her species was superior because they didn't feel emotions and just risked everything to save a collection of alien creatures she would never see again. As they walked back through the corridors of Harmony Station, Marcus found himself thinking about what he had witnessed. Zareth claimed that Vortex didn't love like humans did, that they were free from the weakness of emotion. But he had seen her face when she thought those creatures might die. He had seen the way she cared, even if she couldn't admit it to herself. Maybe the real question wasn't whether Vortex could love. Maybe the question was whether they were brave enough to let themselves feel it. Dr. Chan, Zareth said as they reached the residential section of the station. Yes, she paused, her silver eyes meeting his again. For a moment he thought she might say something important, something that would acknowledge what passed between them during the crisis. Instead, she simply nodded. Thank you for your assistance today. Your emotional approach to the situation was not entirely without merit. It wasn't much, but from a Vorthek who had spent the day insisting that emotions were weakness. It was a start. Good night, Commander, Marcus said. Good night, Dr. Chen. As he watched her walk away, Marcus found himself smiling. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to work together. And maybe, if he was patient and careful, he might help her discover that the capacity for love wasn't a weakness at all. It was the greatest strength any species could possess, the fall. And acceptance. 3 weeks had passed since the habitat crisis. And Marcus noticed that something fundamental had changed in Commander Zareth Kyle. The change was subtle, a pause before her carefully measured responses. A flicker of something unguarded in her silver eyes, moments where she seemed to forget her rigid composure entirely. She was struggling, though she would never admit it. Marcus found her in the observation lounge at 03:00 hours, standing before the massive viewport that offered a breathtaking view of the binary star system. The two suns painted her pale blue skin in shades of gold and amber, and for a moment, she looked almost human in her vulnerability. Can't sleep either? He asked softly, not wanting to startle her. Zareth didn't turn around. Vortex require less sleep than humans. I am simply observing stellar phenomena for 3 hours. She finally turned to face him, and Marcus was struck by what he saw in her expression. The carefully maintained mask of Vortex superiority was gone, replaced by something that looked remarkably like confusion and fear. Dr. Chan, she said, her voice lacking its usual cold precision. May I ask you something? Of course. The creatures we saved in the habitat, do you think about them? Marcus studied her face. Yes, I check on them every day. Why? I find myself ... She paused, struggling with the words. I find myself concerned about their welfare. When I wake in the morning, my first thought is whether they are healthy and comfortable. When I work, I am distracted by wondering if they are adapting well to their new environment. She looked at him with something approaching desperation. This is not normal Vorthek behavior. It's called caring, Marcus said gently. It's perfectly normal. For humans, she corrected sharply. Not for my species. We are taught from birth that emotional attachment is a sign of weakness, a genetic flaw that was bred out of our population centuries ago. Marcus moved to stand beside her at the viewport. What if your teachers were wrong? Zareth laughed. But there was no humor in the sound. Impossible. Vorthek science is precise, logical, superior. We have conquered emotions because they lead to poor decisions, irrational behavior, weakness. Then explain why you've been losing sleep over the welfare of research specimens. The question hung in the air between them. Zareth stared out at the stars, her reflection ghostly in the transparent steel viewport. I cannot, she whispered, and that terrifies me. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that he recognized as the beginning of something dangerous. He was starting to care about this proud, confused alien warrior more than was professionally appropriate. Maybe being terrified is the first step toward being honest, he suggested. Honest about what? About the fact that you feel things. About the fact that caring doesn't make you weak, it makes you alive. Zareth turned to face him fully, her silver eyes wide with something that might have been wonder or panic. If what you say is true, if I am capable of ... feeling, then everything I've been taught, everything I believe about my species, is wrong. Not wrong, Marcus said, just incomplete. They stood in silence for a long moment, the binary stars casting dancing shadows across the observation lounge. Marcus found himself studying the way the light played across Zareth's angular features. The way her skin seemed to shimmer with its own inner luminescence. She was beautiful in a way that was completely alien and utterly captivating. Dr. Chun, she said suddenly, I must confess something to you. What is it? When I watch you work, when I see how you interact with the research subjects, with the other humans on the station, I feel something I cannot name. It is not logical. It serves no evolutionary purpose. But when you are near, I experience a warmth that has nothing to do with ambient temperature. Marcus's heart began to race. Zareth, I do not understand. It, she continued, her voice becoming more agitated. When you smile, I find myself wanting to see that expression again. When you speak passionately about your work, I feel a strange resonance in my chest. When you showed such concern for the habitat specimens, I wanted to... She stopped abruptly, as if she had been about to reveal something too dangerous to speak aloud. You wanted to what? I wanted to touch you, she whispered, the admission seeming to surprise her as much as it did him. I wanted to understand how a being could care so deeply for others, could feel so much without being destroyed by it. Marcus felt his breath. Catch. Zareth. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the station, and the emergency lighting cast everything in harsh red shadows. The computer's voice echoed through the corridors. Incoming transmission from Vorthok High Command. Priority. Alpha. All Vorthok personnel report to communications immediately. Zareth's expression instantly shifted back to military efficiency. But Marcus could see the fear lurking beneath the surface. I must go, she said. Zareth, wait. But she was already striding from the observation lounge, her long legs carrying her swiftly toward the communications center. Marcus followed at a distance, his heart pounding with a dread he couldn't quite name. The communications center was a stark, angular room designed according to Vorthok specifications. Zareth stood at attention before the main display, her posture rigid as the screen flickered to life. The face that appeared was ancient and cruel, with silver eyes like chips of ice and skin, so pale it was almost translucent. Commander Kyle, the figure spoke in the musical Vorthok language, which the station's computers automatically translated. I am Supreme Coordinator of XHI of the High Command. Your recent performance reports have been ... concerning. Supreme Coordinator, Zareth replied, inclining her head respectfully. How may I serve the Empire? Your behavioral patterns have deviated significantly from Vorthok norms, Vexha continued. Our monitoring systems indicate elevated stress responses, irrational decision-making, and concerning levels of attachment to research subjects and alien personnel. Marcus watched from the doorway as Zareth carefully maintained composure. Began to crack. I assure you, Supreme Coordinator, my loyalty to the Empire remains absolute. Loyalty is not the issue, Commander. Contamination is. The old Vorthok's eyes seemed to bore through the screen. You have been exposed to human, emotional patterns for too long. You are showing signs of the weakness we bred out of our species centuries ago. I am functioning within acceptable parameters, Zareth protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Are you? When was the last time you filed a report recommending the termination of inefficient research subjects? When did you last suggest strategic military applications for your scientific discoveries? Vexai leaned forward, his expression coldly analytical. You have been compromised, Commander. You are developing what humans call feelings. The word was spoken like a curse. And Marcus saw Zareth flinch as if she had been struck. I require your immediate return to Vorthok Prime for psychological reconditioning, Vexai continued. The contamination must be purged before it spreads to other personnel. Reconditioning? Zareth's voice was barely above a whisper. A simple neurological procedure that will restore your proper Vorthak emotional discipline. You will return to the logical, efficient state that made you an exemplary officer. The Supreme Coordinator's smile was terrible in its coldness. You will no longer suffer from the weakness of human-like emotions. And if I refuse, refusal would be further evidence of contamination. You would be stripped of rank and exiled from Vorthak space as a genetic defective. Vexas Image leaned back. You have 24 hours to prepare for departure. A transport will arrive tomorrow at 1800 hours. The screen went dark, leaving Zareth standing alone in the communications center. Marcus saw her shoulders shake once, a barely perceptible tremor that spoke of profound inner turmoil. Zareth, he said softly, stepping into the room. She spun around, her silver eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and despair. You heard? Yes. Then you understand why I must return. I am compromised. I am no longer fit to serve as a Vorthak officer. She began pacing the small room, her movements sharp and agitated. I should never have allowed myself to be influenced by human emotional patterns. I should have requested reassignment the moment I began experiencing these ... feelings. What if the feelings aren't contamination? Marcus asked. What if they're just part of who you really are? Who I really am? Zareth laughed bitterly. I am a Vorthak warrior scientist, bred for logic and efficiency. These emotions are foreign, dangerous, wrong. They don't feel wrong when you experience them, do they? The question stopped her pacing. She stared at him, her silver eyes wide with confusion and pain. No, she admitted quietly. When I feel concern for the research subjects, when I experience that strange warmth in your presence, when I imagine what it might be like to ... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. To what? To love? She whispered as if the word might burn her. To experience the kind of bond you humans treasure so highly. Marcus stepped closer, his heart aching for the proud alien who was struggling with feelings she had been taught to fear. There's nothing wrong with love, Zareth. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you complete. Complete? She looked at him with desperate hope. But what about duty? What about loyalty to my species? What about loyalty to yourself? To the person you're becoming? Zareth stared at him for a long moment, her silver eyes searching his face as if looking for answers to questions she couldn't articulate. Then, suddenly, she was moving toward him, her hands reaching up to cup his face with a gentleness that seemed to surprise them both. Marcus? She said, using his first name for the first time. I think I understand now what you meant about love being a powerful force. Zareth. I feel it, she continued, her voice filled with wonder and terror. When I look at you, when I think about never seeing you again, I feel something that is stronger than logic, more compelling than duty, more important than everything I was taught to value. Marcus felt his breath catch as she leaned closer, her alien features beautiful in their strange perfection. I love you, she whispered, the words seeming to shock her even as she spoke them. I do not understand it. I cannot explain it, but I love you with a strength that terrifies me. Marcus reached up to cover her hands with his own. I love you too. The admission hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Then Zareth was kissing him, her lips soft and warm. Despite her alien nature, the kiss was clumsy at first, uncertain, but it deepened as she learned the rhythm of human affection. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. What am I going to do? Zareth asked, her voice breaking. If I return to Vorthak Prime, they will take this away from me. They will take you away from me. But if I refuse, I will be exiled, cut off from everything I have ever known. Marcus held her close, feeling the tremor in her tall frame. There might be another option. What do you mean? Request asylum. Stay here with the joint research project. You could apply for refugee status based on persecution for your emotional development. Zareth pulled back to look at him. You would want that? You would want me to stay? More than anything. But my people my career. Everything I have. Worked for would all be gone anyway if you submit to reconditioning, Marcus pointed out. At least this way, you get to keep who you're becoming. Zareth closed her silver eyes, and Marcus could see the war being fought behind her serene features. Duty against desire, logic against love, the familiar against the unknown. If I stay, she said slowly, I will never be able to return to. Worthic space, I will be cut off from my culture, my people, everything that defined me. You'll be cut off from the culture that told you love was weakness, Marcus corrected gently. But you'll be free to discover who you really are when you're not trying to suppress half of your nature. The next 18 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. Zareth had sequestered herself in her quarters, wrestling with the most important decision of her life. Marcus threw himself into his work, but found it impossible to concentrate. Every few minutes, he caught himself staring at the chronometer, counting down the time until the Vorthak transport arrived. At 1700 hours, 1 hour before the scheduled departure, Zareth appeared in the laboratory. She was wearing her formal, Vorthak uniform, and for a moment, Marcus's heart sank. She had chosen duty over love. Then he saw her face. I have made my decision, she announced to the assembled humans and Vorthaks in the laboratory. I am formally requesting political asylum from the United Earth government and the Colonial Alliance. A shocked silence fell over the room. The few Vorthak personnel present stared at her in horror, while the humans looked surprised but sympathetic. Commander Kyle, said Dr. Talon Vex, the senior Vorthak scientist, you cannot be serious. You would abandon your species for these ... emotional primitives? I am not abandoning my species, Zareth replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was doing. I am choosing to become the best version of myself, rather than allowing others to diminish me. She turned to look directly at Marcus, her silver eyes blazing with determination and love. I choose to feel, she said. I choose to love. I choose to discover what it means to be truly alive. The Vorthak transport arrived precisely at 1800 hours, but Commander Zareth Kyle was not aboard when it departed 2 hours later. Instead, she stood with Marcus in the observation lounge, watching her former life disappear into the star-filled darkness. Do you regret it? Marcus asked softly. Zareth considered the question carefully, as she did everything. I regret the necessity of the choice, she said finally. I regret that my people see emotion as weakness rather than strength. But I do not regret choosing love over fear. She turned to face him, her expression more open and honest than he had ever seen it. You were right, she said. Love is not a weakness. It is the most powerful force in the universe. It gave me the strength to choose my own path, to become who I was meant to be, rather than who others expected me to be. Marcus reached for her hand, marveling at the way their fingers intertwined so naturally despite their physiological differences. What happens now? He asked. Now we continue our work, Zareth said. We study life in all its forms. We push the boundaries of scientific knowledge, and we prove that the best discoveries come not from cold logic alone, but from the passion to understand and protect the universe we share. She paused, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth, an expression that would have been impossible for the rigid Commander Kyle, who had first greeted him on Harmony Station. And perhaps, she added, we show both our species that love is not a human weakness or a Vorthak impossibility, but a universal truth that makes all of us stronger. 3 months later, Marcus stood before the Joint Species Council, delivering a report on the groundbreaking research that had emerged from the human-Vorthak collaboration. Beside him, Dr. Zareth Chen-Shi had taken his surname as part of her integration into human society, presented findings that had revolutionized their understanding of interspecies emotional development. Our research demonstrates conclusively, Zareth told the assembled representatives, that what we term love is not a species-specific trait, but a universal capacity for forming beneficial emotional bonds that enhance rather than impair cognitive function and decision-making capability. In the months since her asylum request, she had become a bridge between worlds, helping other Vortex understand that emotional development was not contamination, but evolution, while showing humans that logic and feeling could coexist in perfect